All right, we're recording. This is the Coach Haas podcast, sponsored by Sports Rehab PA. And now we also have a new sponsor, BioOptimizers. Mikey?
BioOptimizers. So you could check out the Masszymes. Masszymes is really good for helping digestion, getting the most out of the food that you're eating. If you have a busy lifestyle or you're an athlete and you're training a lot, consuming a lot, you want to get the most out of what you're eating. And just in the food that we have today, it's a little bit harder to break down. So the Masszymes helps to really pull the most out of that and give your body the most in the food. So breaking down the proteins, the carbs. And then the P3OM is the probiotic that you can mix in with the Masszymes just to help for some extra digestion. Works well at night. And I've been using it for a couple of years and definitely notice a big difference, especially after just big meals, working out, a lot of high carb protein content. And then I recommend them to a bunch of athletes and friends. They're just kind of having digestion issues, feeling like bloated and just really like they have a brick in their stomach. They're trying to consume a lot of the food. They might have like a recovery drink or a protein drink right after, and then they go home and have a meal. And it's just a lot for the stomach to digest. Or some people do casein protein at night to help with recovery. Taking the Masszymes with the P3OM helps really break that down.
Yep.
Makes it easier on your stomach. So I love the product. I think it's working great. So if you use code JUICY at checkout, you'll get 10% off.
Nice. I'll tell you what, that Mike turned me on to them. It's almost been a year now, and they've literally saved my life, saved my stomach. I thought I was having some issues with my stomach, and he recommended these, the Mass enzymes, and they have been a lifesaver. So anyway, they're our sponsors right now, and we have a new guest tonight. It's a new Thursday evening. We have Miss Kate Decker tonight. Crazy story about this. I want to kind of get into this a little bit. I met Kate through her husband, and I met her husband, I guess it's 2009, 2010. I was running a boxing gym downtown, the Johan Boxing Gym. And Tony happened to come in, and I think he knew maybe Danny, the trainer at the time. And so we just kind of met, and he was the strength coach at Temple, and we got talking. So we ended up linking up on LinkedIn, and we've kind of stayed friends. And then I saw Kate pop up on there. We became friends on there. We've had a couple conversations here and there over the past few years. And then we finally decided to have her on the show tonight. It was a trip. It took a couple weeks to get it done, but we got it done. So Kate, welcome to the show.
Thank you all for having me. I'm excited to be here and get to know you guys even better tonight.
Yeah, this is good stuff. So we definitely appreciate your time. So we always get right into it with everybody. And, it's the podcast was built on curiosity, and the curiosity is about people that are in the industry, leadership. It could be, sports performance, rehab, obviously, but kind of give us a background into, how you got into this and then, where you are now.
Okay. So it's a unique background. I'll admit that I didn't take a straight shot. But I would be remiss if I didn't start with saying a little bit about the way I was raised. So both my parents were into fitness. I'll say fitness in certain ways, but my dad was in the military for 20 years. He was in Army intelligence. He spent another 20 years for the government after that. His last assignment while he was in the Army, which I did not know until pretty recently, was he was training special forces. Wow. And so I grew up, you worked out. My dad actually boxed when he was in the service. So I grew up watching boxing with my dad and tried to learn a little boxing. And anyway,
did he play reveille in the morning to wake you up?
Yeah, no, you would think. and I'm so glad, because if you said that when he was around, he probably would have. He would have jumped right in there.
Yeah, yeah, that's funny.
He had an awesome sense of humor, but that's the way that we were raised. And we were also raised that you look at things from an Eastern philosophy and a Western philosophy when someone gets sick. So we had all kinds of natural healing books when I was growing up. So it was a unique childhood. And then family wise, we were playing volleyball, or the kids out playing soccer, or whatever. We were always really active. I ended up on this pathway, not right out of college. I was in sales and marketing and public relations. Obviously, I was always working out. I was working out like a fiend, like 2 to 2.5 hours a day, like 4 or 5 times a week.
Wow.
And yeah, exactly. And I ended up getting extremely sick and almost lost my life. I lost a huge chunk of my memory, went to 8 different doctors, and had a unique pathway on the way back from being sick. And part of that pathway was my mom picking up a book, The Definitive Guide to Alternative Medicine. That is kind of like the old unabridged dictionaries that's like this thick.
Wow, yeah, it's got everything in it.
Yeah, exactly. So I started reading through that, and that really helped, along with a whole lot of prayer, in moving me into a very different pathway.
Wow.
So I went back to school, and went down a different road completely. But that was all faith-based and following what I believed that was God's will. And 2 years later, I was working with the Philadelphia Eagles.
Wow.
So, yeah, very unique and very blessed.
What type of training were you doing that you got that sick?
Well, it was not the training, I don't believe. And knowing what I understand now, it was probably the type A personality, working 7 days a week and training, and, just constantly going and pushing my body to the limits in every possible way. And then I was around some unique, you guys are gonna freak, some very unique circumstances. I was around somebody who went into Egypt quite a bit and came back with artifacts from, of all places, King Tut's tomb. And yeah, so I did not put 2 and 2 together for a bit. And really thinking back, I should have seen an infectious disease doctor. But I thought, you know what, something doesn't seem right. And it seems like that was the beginning.
So you probably
was around these things.
Caught something from basically international exposure through that.
So, So interestingly, it wasn't until many, many, many years later, when I was coming off of something else, and usually I'm actually pretty healthy, but coming off of something else, and I spoke with a resident that actually did full studies on that exact subject. Because when you hear about King Tut's tomb and the illnesses and people dying, right, there was the King Tut's tomb curse. Well, it turns out that there were numerous molds that were found in the tomb that created respiratory failure. And those molds,
So almost like if them spores were busted open like a black mold. Wow.
Right. So I just went, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Because anytime I told that story, I'd get, some unique looks. And I said, this might seem a little crazy, and the doctor went, no, it makes complete sense. He said, I actually did, my thesis or, dissertation on that specific subject. And I went, oh, wow, that's really incredible. And when I looked it up, every symptom, well, almost every symptom that was listed were things that I ended up going through. So, but that moved me into a different direction to really end up looking outside the box in helping people back from whatever it was that they were coming off of injury wise. And that really assisted in continuing education along the way. And I think it's 18 certifications now. That kind of constant thirst for knowledge, you guys know, because you're very much there.
Yeah, I mean, I believe it. Egypt is one of those places with an extensive history, and there's still so much unknown there. And just even with the way that, the country operates, it's a little bit hard to get in and try to research and dive into a lot of that. I think there's a lot of mystery there still. It's one of the more fascinating histories and cultures to look at if you actually go really back into it. It's it's pretty incredible. It's like some of that ancient Greek and Roman stuff, some of the ancient, Chinese culture. There's a lot of stuff there that we still have yet to find out. So
absolutely,
we may never know. This is interesting, Kate. Go on.
Cool, yeah.
I threw you guys for a loop. You did not expect that pathway at all. Well, no. Neither did I. But that was a big change in my approach and my career. And having a husband, Tony Decker, as you mentioned, who's a 4-time strength coach of the year at the college level, and a dual background in strength and conditioning as well as sports medicine. We talk about, probably a little too much, but we talk about all sorts of injury prevention and return from injury, as well as speed development and strength and conditioning, and even now coming off the pandemic and athletes coming back into play, depending on where they were in the country and what they've been through, the mental and the physical effects that's had on them.
Absolutely. I mean, the mental end, and that's what Mike and I have discussed so many times over and over. It's that part, just being able to get back out and get back into, like, yes, it's definitely, you can see that there's some momentum going now, and things are starting to get back to whatever you want to call normal, but right. Definitely the mental end. And when these kids were coming in during COVID, it was a lot of, obviously everything's one-on-one with me. I kept saying to them, you're in a better position than most. You're in here training, and they're not even able to access this stuff. So you're actually catching up. So stay positive. So that was kind of my little tool that I used throughout to kind of encourage them. I said, if there was ever a good time to get hurt, it was during COVID, because it allowed you to recover most and then be able to get back to play with everybody else, So right. The mental piece is just, it's amazing. Now, you're also the founder and director of the Institute of Athletic Movement. There it is.
I am, yeah. So that started when we were in South Carolina. Previously, we've moved around a little bit with the husband in coaching and my background as well. So we lived outside of Philly for quite some time. Both of us are from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. When we were in the Philly area, we owned a company, Athletic Development and Performance Training, and to adapt to win. So that was what we owned for about 12 years while I was with the Eagles, and we both were at Temple. Tony was the director of strength and conditioning there. Institute of Athletic Movement, we're continuing a lot of the realms that we've done previously. Tony is also at Chattanooga Christian School, and he's the director of strength and conditioning there, as well as the department head of the physical education and wellness department.
Wow.
But one of the big launch off pieces for the Institute. You know, we brought the Institute into it for a big reason. We want to branch out more into education. So that has been a big goal this year. And just in the last couple of months, we've launched a number of products and just joined with CCS for our first Southeast Regional Strength and Conditioning Clinic that was held over the weekend.
Wow.
So that was a big undertaking in the unique circumstances, but it's also been a blessing.
And you also just put together a webinar series too, correct?
Yes, we did. And it's dedicated towards parents and coaches and understanding, and that's actually on recording, and I'll add on a special discount.
Yeah, we'll add some links on at the end as well, and then how to access.
Show notes.
Yep.
That would be awesome. I'll share that with you all, and anyone who's watching, they'll get a special deal on it. But it's a 4-part series, and this tells you, again, our hearts are right where your beliefs are, I believe, in understanding volume and understanding how much is too much when a kid's training, when they're involved in, whether it's multiple sports or they're a single sport athlete, if they're playing that sport year round, what parents need to be aware of. We talk a little bit about overtraining. We talk about injury prevention. We talk about speed development, nutrition. We also talk about the mental aspect and things to be aware of there. So it's a pretty packed in grouping. There are four different webinars, because this was our first time doing a webinar, and this is, our mindset is, why just do one?
Right, let's do, go big or go home.
Exactly.
That's it.
I figured you'd think that.
Well, you know what? When you have that much information, right? It's hard to put together in one series, or one episode. So making a series of them, it gives you a way to be able to break that down and to sell them individually too, I guess, right?
Yes, absolutely. But
not even so much sell it, but to distribute it individually.
Yeah, we just want to get more of that information. We have the clinic that we did over the weekend. We had Coach Johnny Parker, who was in the NFL for quite some time, 3-time Super Bowl winner, and Coach Al Miller, who was in the NFL for 22 years, been to the Super Bowl 5 times. Had Coach Ethan Reeve, who was the president of the College Strength and Conditioning Association, Hall of Fame coach, college coach Rob Oviatt, Rob Panarillo, founder of Professional PT, who's also a Hall of Fame strength and conditioning coach. So,
wow, lots of knowledge, lots of knowledge there.
I'll tell you what, I learned a whole lot. I was also blessed to present, but those are the people, just like you all are teaming up with the very best. We try to search the best knowledge that's out there, and try to get more education out there to help these athletes stay in the game longer, enjoy their sports, and keep them safe and healthy, and not just for the next couple of years, but to really enjoy life and stay healthy. That's a big deal.
So Kate, I want to back up a little bit. Can you talk about how you guys got involved with the Philadelphia Eagles?
Absolutely. So, like I said, I did not start in this industry, even though I was immersed in it at a young age. I was in outside sales and marketing for a bit. I was actually a PR director for a little while for a magazine as well. And
so nothing fitness related? It was just sales on.
It wasn't sales and fitness. One of my first jobs was in fitness, and I did do some of that part-time. and continued to work out myself and then work out individuals, but it wasn't, it wasn't a business, not by a long shot. And now I just lost my train of thought.
How about the Eagles?
Yes. How could I forget? Thank you. Thank you guys. Go Eagles.
He's not an Eagles fan, though. We know that.
No, I am.
Oh, okay. My bad. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Joe's still learning.
He's right. He's right on the border there. Central Jersey. You still got Eagles fans, and then you got the Giants.
It could go either way.
Right,
I understand this.
right.
I understand. Well, at least you chose the right direction.
That's right.
So Tony and I moved to the Cherry Hill area. He was at University of Virginia when we met as the director there. We moved up north and then ended up in the Cherry Hill, Jersey area at Velocity Sports Performance. And 2 of the Eagles happened to walk in the door. Sounds like we're starting a joke. So 2 of the
Sports Performance.
Yes.
Was there a Rich Polar working there?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm not sure at the time. I know as an intern, maybe.
Okay.
Is that what you're thinking?
Just curious. He was there, and he works with a lot of like UFC fighters and stuff now, treating one of his guys. So, but he was at Velocity, yeah.
Okay. I'm horrible with last names. There was a Rich.
Okay.
There was a Rich.
There was a Rich.
There was a Rich. So when we're going about our daily activities, 2 of the Eagles starters, Mark Simonell, middle linebacker, and Sheldon Brown, also starting cornerback, walk in the door. And so the owners, and Tony had stepped out, and the owners come up to me, Kate, these guys, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, sure, I can show them around. And so I take them around and show them what we offer. And then I told them a lot about my philosophy and Tony's philosophy as far as sports performance is concerned. Interestingly, it's all based off of a lot of Coach Al Miller, who was just out here, Coach Johnny Parker, and Rob Pandarillo, who all 3 just wrote and released the book, The System. And it turns out that Mark Simonell had Coach Al Miller as one of his coaches. He was the strength and conditioning head at the Falcons previously. So he, very, very inquisitive, both of them very extremely knowledgeable, and also really great people. So we were talking to them, or I was talking to them, sharing our backgrounds, also talking about the sports therapy and orthotherapy that I did, as well as the sports performance, and talked Mark into coming in at 9 o'clock the next morning. He goes, all right, yep, I'll be there. Shook on it. And I noticed, this is going to be tough on Sheldon, but I noticed Sheldon, when I was, finishing, kind of looking around a little bit. And he is from South Carolina, just a remarkable individual, as well as Mark. And I went over and I said, so Sheldon is like, I know that you're a man of your word, and you will be here at 9 o'clock in the morning too, correct? And I put my hand out, and he goes, yes, ma'am.
There you go.
So
that's it.
That's
the sales end. That's the sales end coming out.
That was the beginning of a beautiful relationship with those guys. And that was the year they went to the Super Bowl previously. Mm-hmm. And so the season became much longer, and they were bringing more and more of their teammates in. And at the end so I was extremely busy that year, to say the least, and all just amazing guys. And at the end of the year, I got a call from Eric Sugarman, who is the assistant athletic trainer for the Eagles. And he is now has been for quite some time, the head athletic trainer for the Vikings. And so he said, we'd like to bring you in, is if you're interested. Or actually, no, he said, we'd like to send you a couple of our top guys. And so they sent a couple of their top guys, and then called and said, we'd like for you to come in. And I sat down then with Rick Burkholder, who is the head athletic trainer of the Eagles, who's now the head athletic trainer for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah.
And that is how I became contracted with them for 9.5 years.
Wow.
So why were they coming into Velocity and not working at NovaCare Complex?
Well, Mike
has been waiting.
no beating around the bush. Let's just get down to the juicy details.
That's what this podcast is about.
That's right.
That's what we're doing.
Get the juice.
We're here to talk about this stuff. So whatever you feel comfortable talking, because I want to shed some light on some things, but I want to hear from you because you've obviously been working with them, and I just want to hear from your perspective. But that's my question. Like, why are athletes coming out of the Eagles organization to come work in a private facility? And then whatever you can share on that comfortably, it'd be great to understand.
Whew. Seems like it just got a little warmer in here.
There we go. I got the lights on. I'm ready.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so obviously I don't know exactly, but I will say this. The strength coaches at the Eagles, there it was Wolfie, and then after Wolfie, it was Coach Barry Rubin. And Rubin is the director of strength and conditioning down in Kansas City with Coach Reed, who was with the Packers with him previously. They're amazing. And Coach Rubin, actually, we got him on the phone while Coach Al Miller was here over the weekend. I think the world of him. I think the world of Wolfie. He had more of he came from the Penn State focus. I think, for one, you have a lot of time as an athlete within a confined area, and you're constantly there. You have meetings constantly there. During some of the off season, right? Many times they're not going to be at the complex. So that's a great time to combine, to balance out what they're going to be required to do when they return back for their mini camps. So I always looked at it from that perspective, but I also was really big on making sure that they weren't overtraining. I wanted to know what they were doing at the complex, and so we could enhance anything that they were doing.
Right.
And again,
you weren't being repetitive. You weren't doing things over.
No, because, I've turned people away before when they've shown me what they're doing.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, you're in a really overtrained status. And the last thing that we need is to add something else. And so I'm always, Tony and I are always very straight with other coaches, with parents, with the athletes, depending on their age, about our beliefs and wanting to come alongside somebody, but there are times to do it and there are times not to do it. So I think that's part of it is, sometimes it's nice to have a change of scenery. We built amazing relationships. So whenever they were with me in another facility, when we were at Temple, we had a number of them come over at Temple. So they were engaged in other relationships outside of the Eagles complex. And again, a different change of scenery to balance out what they were doing at the complex. Also, when they were visiting us and we were training them at Temple, well, that was really beneficial for recruiting, to say the least.
Sure.
And And a number of them I know really enjoyed being around the college atmosphere. That's how they had
got where
grown
they
up,
were. Yep.
right?
Yep.
And a number of them also helped some of our athletes in their process. They would give them tips along the way, and you can't, you can't purchase those types of relationships or that type of mindset of having that giving heart to want to help the next generation up. I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Paying it forward.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. They paid it forward.
Absolutely.
I asked the hot seat question because, this is what podcasting is about. And this is what like social media is about, the ability to share this stuff. And people want to know, they want to learn. And I've come to learn a lot over the past years. A lot of it started when I was taking courses with Kevin Wilk, who works with James Andrews. And you start learning about the injuries that these guys have. And you start learning about a lot of things that go on behind closed doors. And you wonder why seasons are ended for athletes. And you wonder why athletes never, blossom to what they need to become and why they're struggling. And you learn what goes on behind that. And we could get that information because we're healthcare professionals. It's for a learning experience. And then you can kind of see some of the stuff that Kevin Wilk is doing and the amount of athletes that do come to him. And you learn a lot about what goes on behind that too. And even in my time working with Rothman Institute and shadowing a lot of those physicians, some of them being, even like Dr. Sakati, I'll never forget him saying, I have athletes that come in and want to get my opinion on a surgery, and their agent says, well, we could go find someone to get you on the field 2 weeks faster. And the athlete doesn't know because the athlete doesn't understand about the health and fitness. They're trusting to be guided in the right way. But some of these agents are not in the best interest of their athlete. They're in the best interest for the money. It's no secret. And they're going to try to do that. And the physician, like someone like Dr. Sakati, will say, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to put my license on the line to get you on earlier. It's not going to be in your benefit. And more information is coming out, even in Kevin Wilk's research, Mike Reinhold, even Dr. Andrews, and stuff they're talking about is a lot of these athletes are getting back too soon. And they're showing more that rotator cuff injuries are still healing a year after the surgery, even up to 2 years. ACL is obviously a big one. Fans see a player on the field right after the ACL. We all saw it with Carson Wentz. They didn't understand the complexity of the injury. They didn't understand what goes in behind that. I get asked that all the time. What do you think of this athlete? What do you think of that athlete? So I really had to open up my knowledge as a physical therapist, not only for my own interest, but just going forward if I want to really advance my career and trying to understand what is going on at this level. And if I'm going to work with college and high school athletes and maybe at some point pro level athletes, I need to be able to have a conversation with them about these things. So they have to understand. And I've heard from individuals who have worked on pro teams. One, Christopher Knott, who works up in Colorado Springs. He works with a lot of the Denver Broncos. He's Odell Beckham Jr.'s personal trainer. He was on a podcast on the Shrug Collective talking about, in his experience, what he sees is there are a lot of individuals who make their way into the field and the scene, but they don't really have the knowledge or the skills. So example, take a kid who's maybe living in South Philly and dad comes home and says, hey, I have a friend who works in accounting in the NovaCare complex. Why don't you come in for a summer job and start interning or something? So you come in, you start interning a little bit, and then they like you and they keep asking you to come back. So the kid might start continuing to work there, but maybe his heart's not really in on the training, but he's just kind of going through the motions, going in there. Before you know it, he might wind up maybe with a job or so. So Chris Knott's point was there's a lot of good trainers out there who don't get their shot because nobody knows they exist. But there are people who are getting these opportunities because maybe they know somebody or they got in. So it's a very interesting perspective. And then I heard Joe Ken, who worked with the Carolina Panthers for a long time, talking about the same thing. And he was saying, look, he's like, there are a lot of people in this industry that just don't have good qualifications and not doing the right thing. He's like, I get coaches telling me, well, we got 7 guys who could power clean X amount of weight and do this. What does it matter when you're 3 and 7 and your guys are not translating it onto the field? And his point was A lot of coaches are fluffing the numbers and they're letting their players compensate and try to do it, just letting like poor form slide and poor efforts to say they did it So they want the program to look good on paper. So these guys are saying, I'm hitting these numbers, but it's not really there. And then it comes time to the fourth quarter where we have to recruit that stimulus, and it's not being, expressed on the field. And a lot of people have talked about this, about is the training going into the effect of the sport. And I know Kelly Starrett talks about that a lot. Is your training effect, speaking the language of the sport you need to do? And we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing, like you're saying, the overtraining. We're doing all this stuff, but is it translating into the sport, and is it making the player better? And sometimes the things they're doing are not translating, or it's the wrong things, or we have to have the conversation. Some of these young players, you don't know, they get that big contract, they see the money, and they want to go out, and they maybe have like a baller first year, and then all of a sudden things start trailing off. Somebody starts picking up on their skill, and the competition starts learning about you, and then they start training, but you're out partying, and you're not putting in the rest, the quality, all these type of things. So these are like all these conversations that come into one when we come back to the question and the concept of why are we having an injury? How did that guy get an ACL tear? Why is he out for this long? What's going on? So when we hear people who are working in this field talk about this stuff, it's like a light bulb turns on, like, wow, I never really thought about that. So that's why I asked you that question, because yeah, I mean, it's a sensitive topic, but people want to know. They want to understand what's going on. And if I'm going to have a conversation with a high school or a college kid who wants to go to the next level, and they say, well, the pros do this, I need to have a serious conversation about them, about like what that entails and what's going on there.
Well, I think you definitely brought up a lot of amazing points. Coach Rubin with the Chiefs, he has a very similar, we have a similar philosophy as he does. We've had a number of the same teachers, right? Coach Joe Ken, Tony and I visited him while he was with the Panthers. And we believe really strongly in what he does too. And I am writing a book. And in that book, it talks almost identically about one of the stories that you just mentioned. If you're a veteran, or even if you've been the star player for the last 2 years and you're only in the league for 2, it's really easy to get complacent and then come in and, oh, I'm good. And then you can't pass the conditioning test, or you barely do, and you're a skill guy.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't happen. And then
right. You got somebody coming in that wants that job.
And then you also have the shortened time frames. So that's a tough one for the strength coaches who are doing a phenomenal job, is all of a sudden you don't know who they were working with outside of the complex. And then they show up, and now you, instead of having like in college, you have the entire year, right? Yep. The mesocycle, and you're working with these players on a 4-year or 5-year program to continue to build them. So you have that opportunity. In the NFL, you don't, right? Because guys are getting, changed up. They might not be in for very long. They may have been dropped from the team. They may have been picked up by another team. And then the bargaining agreements have narrowed down the time that they have to be at the complex. So, and you have a lot of guys who, if they're an Eagle, that's not their hometown. They could be from California or Florida, and people don't understand a lot of times. Wait, you don't live here full time? No, my family, my entire family is in Oklahoma. Yeah. And, we travel in for the season, and sometimes the family splits. So it can also be the mental aspect. And a lot of rookies have difficulty with that transition going from college to the pros. And yeah, there can be complacency, or I've got this, I'm already the big star, so I don't have to work as hard. Well, you're the big star because you worked so hard to get to that point, and you have to continue it even more so because somebody is nipping at your heels.
Yeah. Yep. The other thing that we are starting to notice is a lot of these guys do have this exceptional talent. I mean, these players are bigger genetically, you know, they're faster. You can take someone like Saquon Barkley. I use this example all the time. You're not going to make him bigger, faster, stronger. Your job is not to mess him up. Is really the words coming from some of the guys who work with these guys. And as a PT, if I was working with him, I'm not teaching him how to power clean. I'm making sure that he has a foundation. The mobility is good. The stability checks the points. So when he gets passed to that strength coach, he can do what's required of him, and then he can go and pass it on to the field. But if he's pushing through a locked up ankle, or his hips are not moving well, or he's not following up with the mobility stuff because he wants to go out and just party all the time, you know, there's that aspect. We're going to start seeing the shift in these things. And that's where we kind of understanding the lane. And that's where Joe and I try to explain to a lot of the patients and with the parents and the athlete we're talking about, where PT, strength coach, and skill coach come in so they understand where that's at. And, you know, when you listen to people who work at these skill levels talk about this stuff, it really kind of breaks it down. You get into trouble when you start trying to like cross over into those lanes. But that communication, like you said, you don't know where an athlete might be during an off season. You know, someone like Chris Knott used an example. He's like, I like Colorado Springs because this is where my family is. But he's like, athletes will come all the way out to me to show me they're dedicated. He's like, I could put a storefront up in Miami, but I don't want somebody coming in for a quick fix. He's like, I want the athlete who's actually dedicated, is going to work. So I give them a program and have a comprehensive write-up. And then I can send that with them back to their team and say, this is what we worked on and here's where we are. Not just, oh, he came in for 2 weeks to get some like quick little thing. And he's like, these athletes have to understand that this is their moneymaker. This is their body. And one injury, that could be it, you know? And that's what we try to advocate to you know, the athletes in the high school and college level, is that you have to advocate for yourself because, you know, it's a hard game out there. You see it in the pro level. You get an injury, they might give you a little bit of time, but I mean, if you're not moving along, it's next man up. They're going to look at someone to replace. You have to look out for yourself. So people like Tom Brady, you know, LeBron James, Russell Wilson, these guys invest a lot of money into their healthcare because they understand that as an individual athlete, they have to look out for themselves, even though they're on a team. But if you look at like pro boxers, UFC fighters, tennis players, individual sport, you know, all these athletes have a nutritionist, you know, the dietitian, the physical therapist, the massage therapist, you know, everyone is looking after them. And that's where their money's going to, you know, to take care of them so they can have longevity in the career, you know?
Kate.
Yeah, and go ahead. Coach.
No, you go ahead. I got a different thought here. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
And sadly, a lot of times those things aren't learned until someone has been in the league for a bit. And then they start realizing, oh, wow, unless they have a group of really strong veteran leaders on the team. And that's obviously beneficial when you have a little bit older team or you have some older, strong leaders on the team who are looking after the younger rookies and going, okay, you guys need to follow these suits. You need to take care of yourselves. You can't be staying up until 3 o'clock in the morning doing video games and then expect to play or expect to go full out in practice. Something has to give. And you all know, yeah, exactly. And you know how important sleep is.
Yes.
And how much that reduces the chance of injuries in itself. But if you're throwing all kinds of toxins into your system and you're not getting enough rest and you're, you know, stressed or your focus is on some unique relationship or whatever it is, all of those can kind of build up. Yeah. And then if you're not taking care of your body, you're not getting therapy, you're not working on proper nutrition. And luckily now things are a little bit more leveled out as far as the number of hours that go into the type of training or the number of practices, and they're not doing as many 2-a-days in pads, et cetera. Yeah. So that you don't have that type of breakdown. But the fact again, that some of the strength coaches don't have the opportunity to have a little bit more control in making sure, you know, teamwork's huge. And if the players aren't in it together from the very beginning and have a little bit more time to get to know one another and build each other up, both, physically and mentally, I don't know, does that end up hurting the team a little bit too?
Yeah. And I want to touch real quick, Joe, before you ask your question,
You're
was
good.
an example that, Chris used when he spoke on a podcast. He used an example of, it was actually the game that Carson Wentz got injured in. That Denver cornerback, I forgot who it was going to cut and the Achilles blew. And they asked an example as to how could something like that happen. And he said an example of, he's like, there needs to be accountability for these guys. So whoever's monitoring these, the staff of the defensive backs, whatever, should have been checking in with the players. Not to say this was a specific example with him, but an example of how an injury like that could happen. It's a multitude of things. And one example was, what was going on? And the guy could go up and be like, hey, games later, I'm going to go and I'm going to go get a massage this morning. And the coach would be like, no, because now what you're going to do is you're going to elicit a nice relaxation response. And then you're going to go, 12 hours later under the lights, in the evening, and you're going to ask for full blown, central nervous system stimulus, and your body, the connection's not there. So your brain says to do this, what your body wants to do, and the connection's not there, and there's a lapse. And then all of a sudden, boom, there's a tear. So you should have been doing something like maybe like an active warm up, some light, cycling, something like that. Keep the stimulus low. I know even like Joe Ken was talking something about where sometimes they might do a stimulus where they have guys go in before a game and just do some 70% RM of like a squats for 1 or 2 reps to excite the central nervous system, something like that. I've actually played around with some of that training myself. It works, because if you're all lethargic leading up and then you want to go 110%, your central nervous system doesn't know what to do. So there's like a deeper week of what to do. So what are your guys doing that week leading up? And getting a massage right before the sport is not, but they don't know. They don't know any better. They think it's good, or they read something on the internet. That's where the multidisciplinary approach would come in and say, this is what we got to do. So that's why I was going to lead into asking you, have you handled situations like that with players having that discussion?
Well, because you just brought that up, I have to say that Tony Decker actually he wrote an article when he was at University of Delaware, which was a long time ago. It was way before we even met. And he started the game day training. And so he actually had, it was very exclusive, and he had the windows kind of taped over so you couldn't see in, and the opponents would be going by and they would just hear, the metal rattling, the plates rattling, right? And guys getting all pumped up. And, imagine being the opponent going, dude, these guys are lifting before they come
right before
out
the game, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that was really awesome. And again, the light activation was huge. Now I will also say, having clinical and medical and sports massage background, there are ways to assist before the game. Obviously, you don't want to sit there and completely relax everything out. That would be like doing static stretching for a long period prior to the game. That's going to loosen things up. That's why we moved to dynamic warm up to create that activation so that they're properly prepared. But I've been in the gray zone many times, having being contracted with different teams and also having a business. And sometimes things will be told to me at whatever the complex is, and that those notes need to be shared with the team. And then there are other times that they will tell me something or show me something that's in confidence, that's in my space. And or even say, and this is not just Eagles. I've worked with NFL players from, I think it's over 12 teams, and with UNC and CCU and Temple University, and consulted with others as well. So there are times that people will share something or call me up when they're with a different team or whatever and ask me different questions. I learned a long time ago, and Joan and I were talking about this prior to our jumping on tonight, about putting the person first. And, you know, my interest is always in making sure that the individual with whom I'm working is well taken care of. I will try to be politically correct in handling a situation, in staying in my lane, Mike, as you said, but
Yep.
also to really have the best interest of that individual mentally, physically, you know, spiritually, to be there for them. And it's those relationships. You know, we don't have kids of our own except our chocolate lab and our black lab Vizsla mix.
Nice.
So, and they're fast.
That was
Let me tell you,
they're
you know,
right.
being a speed coach, I appreciate their quickness. But so many of the athletes that we have worked with over the years, they are part of our family, and there's a reason for that. That's exactly why I put them first.
Yeah. And I think that Joe and I come across that same thing when we have the conversation, that we're understanding a lot more. Hence, with the podcast, you know, people want to share more information because we want to get the best. Nobody wants to have their life dreams ended by like a stupid injury. You know, there's traumatic things, a helmet to a knee, bad knee. But even then, I've seen Kevin Wilkes' research on what he did with Dunta Robinson when his knee was blown up in Houston. That knee was bad, and it came back, and he came back to blow up Deshaun Jackson when he played for Atlanta. That bad hit, that was Dunta Robinson after his knee was completely destroyed in Houston. So we have the ability to rehab, but we need everybody on that same page with the athlete and you know, the coach and everybody on board, including the agent, to understand we want to get the best out of this because your time is short. I think athletes are understanding that, especially if you play a position like a running back. Running backs, maybe lifespans 2-3 years now. Trade-off versus concussion. How much do I want to do this now? They're understanding more. Let's maximize that, and, you know, let's get the best out of this. So there are going to be people out there that I think try to stir that pot because they want to, you know, make the money and just get the player on the field and stuff. And that's something we're always going to be up against, a challenge. But if we do our best to educate the athlete, you can't ever go against that. There's nothing wrong with right education. Like, this is proper sleep, this is proper nutrition. We have things like the Whoop strap now that they're doing a lot of research and giving more feedback. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is like one of their big sponsors. He was just on their podcast talking about it. We have all this information now. Even the military is changing up their ways of training. And now that's like, there's really, with the information out there, it's hard to ignore that when we know it's there. It's just getting it out there, which is another reason why Joe and I like to do this podcast, because we want this information to get out there so people can get it. I mean, I can't tell you how many patients I've treated who have gone down the wrong path, the wrong misinformation, or spent so much time and money doing the wrong things. And then I just have a conversation with them and they're like, wow, if I only knew. And just imagine if that was like your child or your mom, you know, or, you know, your spouse. Like, it's the same thing with these players. You know, it was just like when the movie Concussion came out. It's not that we don't want them to play football, but they have a right to know what the risk is here and understanding that, you know. And it's the same thing with these things. You have a right to understand and learn about ACL injuries and how to prevent them, proper nutrition, how to prevent issues, you know. So I think the education and knowledge is just so big. So that's why it's awesome to have somebody like you on here who has been in this.
Yeah, been in the trenches.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great to also get somebody like Joe Ken on here. I mean, he's hysterical with, you know, his Russell sweatpants and his shirt. There's no flash. He's just in there, like, camera angle is poor angle, and he's just crushing weight. And he has such great knowledge, and it's just awesome to learn from somebody like that. But then you got these guys on Instagram doing all this flashy stuff, and it's like, no, like, another one is like Ben Bruno, who works with all the celebrities. He talks about it. He's like, we're doing basics now, and he's like, he takes all of his NBA guys and he makes them do deadlifts with those bumper plates that are shaped like pizzas. He's like, you got to work for it, bro.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
You know?
There you go. Yeah, and part of this thought process was working with different college athletes too, and seeing, you know, if we were working with someone one-on-one since they were 7 years old or 16 years old, and saw that build up in their biomechanics, in their running, you know, acceleration and maximum speed positioning and the right agilities. And then seeing college athletes, I spoke on this over the weekend and was showing the fascial ramifications of the body with repetitive motions in and out of sport, and then the reduction of performance that can happen if those things continue, and then correcting it, how that can enhance performance. Even showed one of my NFL linemen from the back being in a pretty twisted, rotated position, and here he's that repetitive motion over and over and over again. If he's laying on one side of the quarterback as an O lineman,
yeah,
and then they switched him to the other side, like he's not going to be able to play on the other side because his body has transformed itself and is being held fascially and muscularly in that position. And that's exactly what happened. He ended up getting cut from that team. He ended up playing for another team, and we worked on some of that. And even college athletes, I was with one group, and this one young football player came up and he's going, you know, Coach, I'd really like to be, I want to get more explosive. I want to really work on my speed, my agilities. I'm like, awesome, because I am all into that from a lifting perspective and biomechanics. And I said, well, have you been doing, you know, what's your speed background, and what's, you know, what have you done? Oh yeah, I've been working with these people and yeah, and I was like, show me what you got. And he ended up having this completely bent over posture. And it's, you know, so many times there's a big fallacy when it comes to the lean, the triple extension in that acceleration phase. And so many players, you know, not just in football, but in soccer and lacrosse and field hockey, in basketball, first step, and sadly it happens at the college level and younger, and sometimes later in the season in the NFL, you'll start to see the breakdown if those things aren't continuing to be addressed, right? Because of the breakdown in that constant power or athletic position that the athletes are in. They start getting out of that position. They start overstriding because they're bending from their hips instead of leaning from their ankles and keeping everything else, you know, firing through. If they're unable to get into those positions, how in the heck are they going to come through their hips in a tackle position?
Yeah.
Right.
And then you start to see the breakdown again of an overemphasized emphasis on the anterior aspect of their body. And I've even had, going back to that football player, I had him just try to lean into a triple extension position. And he was like this.
Yeah.
And he was saying, oh yeah, I've been training with these guys on speed. And I'm like, oh, it kills me. I mean, it's just like, dude, you were wasting so much time and you're hurting yourself.
Yes.
Like that puts him in a bad position, as you all know, for more of an injury to take place. His head is going to be dropped. His erector spinae aren't strong. He's going to be overstretching his hamstrings. He's overstriding, and you're just looking at all kinds of issues. Plus, if he's overstriding and the other guy is in a great position, he's going to be missing plays as well.
Yeah, but they're pushing through it. They're just doing it because they're so used to it. Yeah. Joe, we know about that.
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny because I'm over here thinking, like, how do you handle this athlete who is stubborn like this? That I mean, this I've had several recently, and it's like, okay, everyone wants to see and challenge Coach Joe right now. But how are you? I mean, because it's between the athlete and some of the parents. Like I'm going back and forth. And, just recently we had an athlete with a high ankle sprain, and they just didn't want to take the time off because the soccer games were so important that they had to play in them, which, by the way, the practices are just as important. So, but there was no time to take off. And I suggested that there be a 3-week break in order for this thing to really try to heal. Now, I didn't say 3 weeks of sitting on the couch. I said 3 weeks of no playing soccer and come in and train and do some mobility stuff on your own and do some, that 3-week break. And they still haven't taken it. And I just got a text message the other day that this individual is now having some of the issues again. So I said, well, I mean, it's obviously going to happen, right? I mean, what's the next injury that's going to happen after an ankle sprain? An ankle sprain, right? Because it's you're not loading the tissue the proper way and progressing it the right way. And I haven't had that proper amount of time to be able to transition and load the tissue the proper way to get her back on the field the right way. And we're just continuing into this cycle. So how do you handle something like that?
I will say that I have a bit of a stubborn streak. So that comes in handy when I'm speaking with somebody else who has a stubborn streak. And again, that's I feel for you because it's a tough scenario. You have the right heart, you have the right information and the knowledge and the education, and you want to take care of these athletes. You want to take care of whoever walks in your door. And again, there are just so many misnomers now, well, I have to play constantly, otherwise I'm not going to get a scholarship. I need to be there for my team. I'm getting pressure from the coaches to return to play.
Yep.
I'm getting anxiety, not
playing,
thinking I'm going to sit out and not playing.
Yep.
I'm letting everybody down. So looking at it from the mental aspect, providing as much information as possible and saying, if this doesn't happen, because the body has that domino effect. We've all seen it, right? You have a weakness, and like you said, what are the chances they're going to have another ankle injury, right? Well, if their ankle is not healed properly, how are they going to be able to biomechanically be in the correct position? And then if they're in just about any sport and they get bumped into, right? And the proprioceptors aren't able to jump in properly in a quick fashion, all sorts of things can happen, because then you're looking right up, you're looking into the knee, you're looking into the hip, you're looking into the back. Sports will find a weakness, right? If you have a competitor who's going to be, or even sometimes it doesn't even have to be your opponent. It can be your teammate falling into you or cutting, and that happens. Those are the unpredicted aspects, and even young sports medicine people I've talked to, and I said, "What's an unpredicted drill?" They're like, "I don't know." And it's like, well, you need to, in that teaching fashion, you need to know what that unpredicted aspect is, because sports is unpredicted. So if you're doing all predicted drills and you're expecting to go out there full force without that strength component and the ability to start cutting, you're going to be cutting in your sport, right? In just about every sport. You're going to have to explode. You're going to have to decelerate, which is one of the later things in rehab to come back, right? Right, guys?
Yeah.
So all of those aspects have to come into play. One thing that was mentioned over the weekend was, can you go into a one-legged squat? And some can, some can't. Well, if you can't go into a one-legged squat, This was, I think, Coach Miller's thought process. You can't go, you're not ready. But if you're, again, looking at a lot of the cutting drills and the progressions that you have, are you able to do any of this? Because that's without any contact.
Exactly. And that's, I want to touch on that point. Then I have another one too. That's what I explain to a lot of these parents when they come in. I say, listen, most of what we're doing, and this would be like ACL, like mid to late stage. What we're doing is they're still at about 70 to 75%, and everything is predicted right now. So no, just because they're doing this doesn't mean that they're ready for soccer practice, because soccer practice is 100%. Soccer practice is a lot more unpredictable. Like everything right now, I'm telling the individual, go to here, stop, cut, like when you're out on the field, it's all reactionary, so we build to that, but just because we're doing those drills doesn't necessarily mean that we're ready to get back to play yet.
Right.
Right,
absolutely. And even the surface itself, they're going to be playing, they could be playing on turf, they could be playing on grass, they could be playing on multiple planes there, depending on, home or away games. So absolutely.
Kate, what type of, you got something, Joe? Another one?
I have a question for the both of you that I'm going to wait till after you ask this one.
I was just going to ask, what type of testing are you doing to look at this? So we know, like Joe and I use a lot of the functional movement systems, Gray Cook and that stuff. And we have the motor control screen, which will objectively assess a lower extremity reach, like a single leg squat. We're looking for symmetry with that. There's a plank position with the upper extremity cross reach. And then we also have the fundamental capacity screen, which will actually evaluate in-depth impact control and explosive control, as well as energy recycling. And I mean, it's like a safety net for these kids. I mean, it catches stuff right away. Then it gives you objective numbers. I mean, it's a lot of stuff to compute, but they have the equations, and I will take the time to fill it out so the parents and the athlete can understand how we got to those numbers, and we could see where the deficits are and what that means. This leg's doing this leg's not doing this. This is where you are, it's where you should be. And if they were compliant, they would do it in the beginning of the season, and we could do it just before tournaments or playoffs to make sure that, how many players stand on one leg, kick with the other. Well, one leg's going to become more of the stability leg throughout the season. The other one's going to be a little bit more mobile. What's happening if we retest that? So we use those systems. And I speaking in the NFL, if you Google jump, what's the one picture that comes up? And it's Robert Griffin III at the combine with the knees collapsing in. I mean, it's a shame. It's an embarrassing picture for him, but there's a lot behind why he tore his ACL twice. I mean, there was a whole thing there that, Kevin Wilk went on in his course about, he went back too soon and Shanahan didn't listen to Dr. Andrews, whatever. But he, didn't have the right foundation. And you're talking about looking at these things, and that should have been caught, saying this is our starting quarterback. We got to fix these things. So I'm just curious, what testing and stuff are you guys doing to catch this stuff to help these guys?
Okay, so we have used FMS before. That actually was involved in that while he was at University of Delaware early on, again, before I knew him. So we look at that, but I'll also say this, when working with teams, we've developed different cues, so different ways to look at things, because if you're evaluating 100 players, right, or if we have half the team inside and half the team outside, and 50, 60 players sometimes.
No way.
I've seen the breakdown of, it's not the breakdown of FMS. I've seen the breakdown of where FMS is being done. And then what do you do with it now that you have 115 players and you don't have enough people? So with one of the teams, we were able to drop their soft tissue injury rate by 40%.
Nice.
within
Wow.
2-year time frame. And so it works. Injuries in general, because of the way that the exercise science plan is created, that takes care of a whole lot of everything that we're doing. So looking at making sure that the proprioception's in there, making sure that the extremities are addressed, making sure that the explosiveness is in there, making sure that we're minimum now a 2-to-1 ratio posterior to anterior, and looking at the hamstring strength, 65 to 70% of the quadricep strength. Mm-hmm. And so we're looking at all of those aspects, but we're also making sure, you know, if we see somebody squatting and they're coming up, you know, into a quarter squat and dropping down, then we're not getting that full range of motion. The other aspect I have, if I'm one-on-one with someone, I'm looking at things from a muscular standpoint, the biomechanical, as well as the explosive tendencies. Are they in a good cutting position, right? Are their knees coming in? Are their knees going out? Are they, you know, unable to control their ankles? So we're looking at all of those things during different cuts, during the dynamic warm-up, during the progressions of their speed drills or their agility, figuring out where they're lagging behind, doing some of the timed drills as well. And then if I'm one-on-one with someone, I have 3 pages of different observations. And one of them, because I'll share, because we've talked a little bit about ACLs here, was with a client, and some of this I do Zoom wise also. I have clients that blessed now to work with clients around the country. You know, I looked pretty intently at all that this young athlete was doing, and I'm not sure who he was seeing physical therapy wise. I can't remember right now. But they did a really nice job. They did a really outstanding job in creating a strong foundation. But the way I look at the body is a little different, because again, at the fascial planes, and I'm going to sit there, which is the connective tissue that surrounds and also is intertwined within the muscular system. In case anyone here does not understand that, it's actually that connective tissue, the fascia, is actually stronger than muscle tissue, and it has tensegrity. And so if those fibers, which now in the Fascial Congress at Harvard was found to contract and relax just like muscle, but it's stronger than that, kind of a big deal in looking at those components when we're looking at sports performance or recovery as well. So I just want to add that in case somebody else listening isn't familiar. But we'll look at all of those with this ACL athlete. One of the things I do is closing their eyes and marching in place. And that tells me a whole lot. It tells me, depending on their position, it tells me according to their sport, as well as, again, the 3-page list of everything else that I'm going through. And many times I don't go through that entire list. But this particular one, he was completely turning to his one side. I mean, immediately. And we stopped and he opened his eyes. He's like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? What the heck's going on? Yeah. And with my sense of humor, I'm like, I don't know, you really should see somebody about that. But then obviously we straightened him out, got him working, and he was also quarterback. So the quarterback position and that constant, you know, the quarterback drop and then driving out, and those drills over and over again. I wasn't surprised to see that, but that tells me that that's the way his body wants to go. Mm-hmm. And that means that his head, his eyes are going to be keeping him in this position while his body might be doing something like that. And then you have all of these additional pressures and torque on all sorts of different areas. And then you're looking at you know what, why did he have another knee issue?
Yeah.
Do you have physical therapists that you really work closely with and that you like, you know? And I mean, are there ones that you're seeing? Because, I mean, Joe, we get some that are coming from some networks. And I mean, I'm going to say it as physical therapist, it is embarrassing. And there's really no excuse for it. I mean, this is like basic stuff and they're getting cleared for return to sport. And I'm saying, how? They can't even stand on one leg yet. This is basic foundation. Even if you're like 6 months out, you should know that that does not look stable. I mean, I've shown some of the videos to like little kids and they're like, that doesn't look good. So
that's not a good sign. Okay, so again, another heated discussion. I love this stuff. You guys are awesome. I'm not just going to put it on physical therapists, okay? Because you know, from a therapy standpoint, I think, you know, both my husband and I are type A, have type A in certain areas. I'm pretty much type A in just about every area. Tony is very much in sports medicine and strength and conditioning.
It's okay.
But
I
again,
have my OCD stuff type
yeah.
in too. Yeah.
There you go. So so he's a better mold. I'm trying to live more along his lines. I'm working on it. But again, the educational aspect, and we'll see different things, you know, we've seen all sorts of things over the years, and then we're wondering what the heck is going on. And that can be, I realize this, I'm not okay in being average.
Yep.
But to be an above average at something, somebody has to have the middle of the road, and someone has to be below average in whatever that occupation is, whatever that realm is. And some people have so much passion and just, you know, like you guys, right? You're doing the podcast, you're researching, you know, all this information, you're at an elite level. And so when you're so pushed for excellence, you don't understand what the heck, you know, why people are passed along to the next level. And I have a hard time with it too. And that's something that keeps me up at night.
Wow, man, she just stole one of my questions, Mike.
We'll eventually get to that. Yeah,
man. Wow.
But Kate, I understand where you're coming from, but I mean, like, I was a new grad once and I had to go and I took a lot of continuing ed early on. I went and dove right into FMS. I took mobilization courses. I took Kevin Wilkes' course. I spent a lot of time shadowing Rothman physicians, trying to learn from them. I was really flattered and, humbled by the amount of them that allowed me to go down there and shadow them and learn and understand, because you don't learn this in school. Even I'll be going into doing this 11 years in October. I am still revamping the way I'm doing stuff and still questioning how I'm doing stuff. Is there a better way? You like talking to individuals like yourself. What can I learn from Kate? Even though I know all these things, and she says, well, what can I plug in? All these people we bring on our podcast, we try to build a network where we could draw from that. And then those people in return will reach out to me, and say, hey, Mike, I got a PT question, this, that. And then I'll go to them and say, hey, I got a speed question, got a strength question. And you start building all these resources. So the more you kind of plug in those gaps, so you become there. And like you said, there are all those people that had that mediocrity, but our goal is to try to pull more people away from that and get them into the excellence realm,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way there. If I go to a doctor, it is going to be an exceptional doctor who is renowned in what they do.
Mm-hmm.
God forbid if I had to have a surgery, I'm going to go get a few different opinions.
Yep.
Yes.
I'm going to have an understanding of what that person stands for, if they believe in, if possible, doing the therapy route before, going in for surgery, because that's my personal belief. If I'm going to have physical therapy, I'm going to go to the best people, because I know that then I have the opportunity to have the best outcome. I'll give you this example. There was an athlete that was coming back, and for the life of me right now, it's leaving me. It was a really unique knee surgery. And Tony actually knows the person who developed the actual surgical procedure.
Oh, wow.
For coming back, and offered the individual who was rehabbing the opportunity to talk with this incredible doctor who knew everything about it, because he created the process, the procedure, as well as, working on the rehab and what all was involved in that. And instead, this individual, young individual, very sure of their own belief systems, said, no, I'm good. Had never worked with this type of injury before.
Yeah.
And worked with an O lineman. And the first time they were able to run, this lineman had him run 1.5 miles.
Oh my God. Wow.
Because you always
wait, did he make it?
Need great.
Wow.
Nice.
Wow. 1.5 miles. That's good stuff.
Yeah, totally prepares him for everything he needs to do, and a great progression. So that kind of stuff, that kills me, because I hate seeing that. And again, like I said, you have people who are elite. I will always work on finding the best in the business, and I'll get different opinions. When I became ill, I saw 8 different doctors, and I don't think I would be blessed enough to be here to talk with you all if I didn't do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely should do that. I mean, that's, the type of stuff that, we see as well. I think a big problem too is there are a lot of settings that work, factory style. I can only speak for PT, there's still a lot of companies that run high volume, high metrics. The quality of care is not there. And it's no hidden fact. I don't need to speak badly on any companies. The patients come in and tell me, and I know how it is. And I say, yes, I know. They say, hey, here's your exercise program, and you go in the corner and do it. And that's called skilled physical therapy. And these are people that want to pronounce themselves as doctors or something. And this is why we're not getting the recognition as doctors, because there's that extreme and then there's the other. So, this is why we want to put the education out there, because people should be able to do the research and understand that and see that. And there's still physicians out there that still think squatting is bad for your knees, and don't deadlift anything, don't pick up anything, ever, and it's like, there comes a point where, like you said, politically correct and to be respectful, but you have to educate the patient on saying, no, that's incorrect. And I think sometimes as PTs, we're so scared to, step on toes, but if something's wrong, it's wrong. And I'm not scared to be able to butt heads with a physician, because I have the foundation to back it up. I would never do that with something I have no understanding of, but I will say, no, I'm sorry, I disagree, and here's the reasons why. And if I'm ever going to be respected as a professional and get the respect of clientele and patients, I have to be able to stand on that ability to be able to explain that, And it's different than calling up a surgeon and saying you're an idiot versus saying, look, I disagree because X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
There's still a lot of patients out there who will be working with physical therapists, and they'll say, when we're talking about doing a progress, they'll say, well, let me see what the physician says. That's like this. You go out on a date with somebody, and then that's it. You go out on a date with somebody else. You continue seeing them for 6 weeks, like you would PT. Then at 6 weeks, that person asks and says, hey, do you want to further this relationship? And you say, well, I want to see what that person I saw 6 weeks ago says. How does that make any sense whatsoever?
Right.
And I said that to a patient, and they looked at me like, wow. And I was like, you see what you just said to me? what is somebody who hasn't worked with you 3 times a week for an hour and knows more about your personal life also with the way you move and how you're feeling going to say to you about that? And that's something that Joe and I are seeing, that sometimes we will get these physicians to say, oh, yeah, you're cleared to run. Did he do anything with you? Did he or she do anything with you to warrant that you're ready to run? Are they looking at you? Where are those metrics coming from? Because when I was first started working, we didn't really have those metrics. And, functional movement systems and other performance measures have progressed where now we could warrant, yes, this warrants the ability to run. Whereas before I was like, you're at 6 months. Okay, give it a shot. And they go back and it's like, oh,
check the box.
No, you should not be running.
Right.
But you said I could. And like those words are like, like God's gifts to the ears of the athlete. Yes, you can go back, but that's all I want to hear. Yeah. That's all the parent hears too. So, if we could get that education and saying, here's why you shouldn't be doing that. Because even again, we get some of those coaches with the soccer, the 2-mile test. They're still doing that. And we're trying to explain, how does that translate to soccer? How does running 2 miles even translate to the energy system of soccer? And these girls are
that time of the year, Mike. We're getting to that time of the year.
Yeah. So when you said to run the 1.5 miles, I was thinking about performance measures, and that's what made me think about that. Like, where, why, like where's that?
Why ever?
Hey, look, I have this question that's boiling over here that I have to ask, because it's everything that both of you guys have been talking about for the last 12 minutes is circling right back to this question, that this is a live sample of what I got going on. And it's about the deficit between one leg to the other. And again, since we are all ACL, let's just use that. I have an athlete, and they're telling her that she's still, PT and I are now kind of sharing this patient. They're telling her that she's still having a deficit on her operative leg to the non-operative leg. They've done nothing for the non-operative leg, and she's been there almost 5 months. I told her today that we were going to do the other leg. And she's like, well, they're not doing it because they don't want that leg to get stronger than the other one. Now, hold on. I have 2 professionals here. I'm going to play like I don't know what's going on here. If I put you into a split squat and I have 2 20-pound dumbbells in my hand, and I go into a split squat with the non-operative leg forward first, and I can complete 8 reps, and I go to the other side and I can complete 8 reps. Did either side get stronger than the other? Anyone? Okay.
Mike, I'll let you take this one.
I'm not understanding.
Hear what you got.
Yeah, I'm not understanding the logic behind that. So please, Michael, physical therapist, please give us some insight to
there's
this.
Still that older school mentality that they're not understanding. And, we have not only research, but research is one component. There's also the clinical aspect too, and the results and what's happening there. So the research has shown that when they were rehabbing ACLs or any operative leg, they were missing out and they were focusing just on that leg, that the other side started to begin a deficit, number 1. Number 2, with a lot of these athletes that we see, it's the non-injured side that is the problem. And I've seen that multiple times, whether it's a locked up ankle, instability, or poor motor control in the hip, or there is weakness. And it's because, like you talk, Kate, you have, a lineman that's always going to one side. Same thing with a soccer player that's only going to one side. So one leg becomes more dominant in certain things than others. And sometimes you just get some funky findings because human performance is human performance. They might be able to stand on one leg and squat and be really stable there, but they can't rotate and do a multi-directional movement on that leg, whereas the other one they can. It's because the brain and central nervous system have just developed patterns to compensate for something that you're just seeing all this. And sometimes it's like there's no FMS test or there's no anything that give you like an exact answer. It's just the way they're presenting, and that there's an asymmetry. So just fix it. and even them out for where they need to be, but understanding that if they are a position player, one side is going to have a dominant thing, you know, a dominant movement or a dominant requirement. It's like a baseball player. Like, you're not trying to push certain range of motion for that because they need some of that. But understanding that you're trying to minimize, you know, the excessive effects. You know, that's kind of how like Reinhold puts it. That's how Kelly Starr puts it. You know, how much is the body having to compensate? Are we keeping that window really, really small where they're having to do this and we're preventing from getting excessive? Because a lot of these kids, it's excessive. It's all over the place.
And the best part about it is when I put her into that position, the non-operative leg fatigued quicker than the operative leg. And she's like, oh man, my leg. I said, oh, you mean the stronger leg that kept going into valgus?
Yeah.
That leg. Oh, okay. The leg that they're saying has the deficit. So then the part two of that is, what are they using to determine that deficit then? And why have they not decided to work on the right leg, which is the non-operative leg?
Yeah, I mean, well, they have things like doing the handheld dynamometers and the biodex actually get the strength performances, but a lot of the individuals we're seeing, especially at this early stage, they don't really have much of that capacity for that, you know, high-end strength output. It's more of a neuromuscular control that we're working on. By the time they're actually going to start building pure strength, they're going to be seeing somebody like Joe, but the problem is they're skipping all that foundation, going right to Joe. And they don't know how to even coordinate the movement to eventually start to build muscle mass. So they're thinking strength and bulk. And I'm like, you're not even in that realm. You're not even strong yet. We're not talking about strong numbers. You know, this is different. Like, I had an athlete ask me, how is Odell Beckham Jr. squatting over 200 pounds after an ACL? I'm like, because his foundation is that much higher that he could start doing that, whereas a high school athlete didn't even know how to squat, which is why they're in the position that they're in. So you have to understand the complexity of the individual we're working with. So let's give the floor to Kate now.
Nice pass. Thank you. I'll take that. So I'll give this case study that I ended up doing, and it was a football player that I worked with. Not that I just work with football players. This just happened to be another football player who had a very unique foot injury and kept him out for over 6 months and was not able to do any football drills, anything. Wow. And the area was not healing. This one small muscle on the foot was not healing. It just continued to cause pain. And even in the test the doctors were doing, it still was, you know, inflamed. So they sent him to me, and I looked at his, you know, I went through my focus, the movement patterns, and he was doing strength, but I was taking him through different movement patterns that I normally do, you know, the march, different rotations, checking his squats, etc. And then I ended up seeing some measures of major imbalances from the middle of his back all the way down. Wow. And took him through probably about, I'll say 16 muscle tests, orthopedic muscle tests. And so many, I think maybe 2 were strong.
Wow.
And so that includes hip and, you know, again, but it was tracing what I was seeing in his patterning. What had happened, because he was also in a boot for a long period of time, which was changing his gait tremendously, which was twisting and rotating the middle of his back and his hips. And so, you know, all of these things were I believed could be a contributor. And so in looking at his patterning, I worked on moving all of these areas back into place manually, and then working with him on some of those other components, on his gait work, et cetera, with different other assisters from a strength standpoint. And within a month, he was able to do some additional, he was finally able to go back on the field in minor capacities. Within 2 months, he was probably about 85 to 90% out on the field. And that was, again, he was out completely for over 6 months. And so one of the things that I will do is, if talking, just like you were just talking about, showing the deficits, right? If talking isn't getting there, if they're not seeing it, and some people know their bodies, some of the professional athletes, they could have, their hips could be off like 1/8 of an inch and they'll feel it. And then you have some people who go around with such a dysfunctional state, you don't even know how they're walking around, let alone playing sports. And so some people will be very in tune with those, some of the things that you're talking about, Joe and Mike. That makes a whole lot of sense. Others, I'll look just like I did with this athlete, and I'll take them through the muscle testing. They're like, that's my strong leg. And I'm like, flop.
Well,
Like, I'm 5'4", I weigh like 115 pounds. And if you're 350 pounds and I can move you with 2 fingers, Houston, we have a problem.
So that brings out the point as to, we're talking about how do we keep the players involved so they don't get discouraged and lack of motivation. I talk to the athletes too about stuff that you can do and not what you can't do. And I know I've seen, Kevin Wilk will do that with a lot of his, football players and athletes in there. It's okay, well, we can't run and do football drills, but I'm a wide receiver, so I'm going to do stability drills and I'm going to work my handwork. I'm going to start getting my hands on a football. And I talk about that with some of the soccer players. I'm like, you can't run and cut right now. Let's stand on one leg and let's do some soccer drills. Let's work some kicks. Let's work some of that, some hand-eye coordination stuff. If you're a goalkeeper, I think goalkeepers are a lot easier to work with in that sense because there's more you can do. But even on the 1 foot, you want to work on some dynamic stability. Let's start training different positions and work some foot drills. So it's not focused on the things we can't, but the things that we can, and then you brought up the boot. And, that's something that we see too. We have to use these outcome measures that these insurances approve, like the LEFS, and they don't take an account for someone's rating will be much better when they're in the boot because they could walk more because they're just rocking over the foot. When they come out of the boot, they have to walk more. It's a lot more stress on the foot. The foot's not bending to the dorsiflexion. It's more pain. It looks like they regressed. There's nothing on that outcome measure to account for that. And it's very frustrating because that's what insurance companies are looking at. And you have to spell it out to them like this is the case, When athletes are coming to you, are they going through an insurance or is this like a cash base? Like how are they getting through to be able to pay for all this healthcare that they get?
For me in particular, I am usually either contracted with teams or people will pay me straight out. So okay. I'll do package prices again, if I'm working on running form, even if there's no injury, obviously I'll do strength and speed and all of that. So I'll do packages to assist with the prices when they're coming back from an injury. That's helpful as well. I don't do insurance. I tried that and realized how time consuming that is.
Yep.
And I did not have that time available.
And it restricts you. Yep.
You can't do what you want to do. I mean, and some of them, if they're really stingy, they give you a couple visits at a time. And it's like, how do you not have a background understanding of the complexity of this condition? That 4 visits at a time is not going to cut it. If you want to see progress notes, we could do some progress notes, it's fine. But just giving these visits, they got to be in here doing this. And it limits you, it constricts what you need to do. Yeah.
And just to add on to your point, as far as, I'm really big on focusing on the positive also. And that's, that's the base of the book that I'm writing. And so I'll film and I'll write tons of notes. And when someone says, oh, well, I'm not progressing, I'm like, let me show you where you were 2 weeks ago.
That's a good idea.
Let me show you where you are now. And it can be so enlightening, and you can just see the look on their faces like, wow, man, I've really come a long way. And yeah, I can, now I can see it. Because when you're with yourself 24/7, many times you're not going to see those increments. And so I am a very visual coach and person. So sharing those things. And like you said, depending on if we're working with the team and we're working with athletic trainers and PTs and the team doc or not, having some of those conversations with whoever else they're seeing when they're seeing us privately, making sure that we're all on the same page. But if someone is in a boot and we can get them into a position to still do clean pulls coming through their hips, but not weight bearing, right? And I don't suggest any of this to anyone who might be listening without having the proper individuals involved.
Right.
And
Proper
so
supervision, folks. You hear that?
Please it. Yes.
Hey, we have an enormous audience. So everyone out there, do you hear that? Supervision. Yes.
Making sure the right people are involved and that you're not trying something that you saw on YouTube, but that you have, people like Joe, Mike, myself, having people who are certified, who are involved, and have that heart and that education. But we will be very adaptable to different injuries and come up with creative but very safe ways in talking with the different medical providers who are involved, and still being able to explode or do whatever is possible. Sometimes we'll do band work in working on agilities and things along those lines if they have certain injuries that they're unable to go full out in other capacities. So
yeah.
I'll tell you what, we could go on and on and on for hours. We may have to save some, Mike, to get her back on again.
Look, we're all about bringing on guests multiple times because things evolve, things come up, new things come along. So we want to be able to discuss that, or maybe somebody did something really big and we want to share that. But our goal is we want to push this podcast out in our community. We're obviously not like Joe Rogan's podcast, but the goal is we want to grow this into this whole area of Bucks County and farther. So we want to get this out to the parents, to the coaches. I don't know how many of the high school athletes would listen to the podcast, but I think if it's an interesting topic, they might. But definitely college, anyone when they're driving, listening, to get this knowledge out there. And that's what I've really learned about podcasts over the past couple of years is people are really coming on and they're really, opening up the books and, cracking the knowledge on some really cool stuff. And they're not scared to speak the truth. Some of the conversations can be a little uncomfortable and sensitive, but people are learning and they want to know. And with social media, there's so much stuff being put out there and people want to know, like, is this legit? Is this good? Like, does this person even have a degree? Like, what is this? So I don't think there's anything wrong in being confident and, having a foundation in what you do, and learning to say that's not good or that's wrong. Like, and here's why, because you have the education, the experience and the background to back it up. It's not just trash talk. It's actually knowledgeable. And this is the conversations that I have with the parents and the individuals. And they will bring up tough conversations. And that's why I like to challenge myself with knowledge too, and learning, as much as I can, especially from someone like yourself, Kate, because you never know what else you could absorb. And I think the minute you close your mind off, you stop growing. And that sounds very cliche, but it's true. And there's a lot of practitioners that get stuck in what they know and they don't want to expand anymore. And I feel like even though I have a decade under and I've learned so much, like I said, I'm still learning, still trying to get better, still trying to improve. And everybody we bring on this podcast is the same. So if you notice, we try to cherry pick our guests because we're building a network of that. And if you look at some of our previous guests, they all have a pretty cool background in something they do. And we think that everybody on this podcast, without even knowing each other, can sit in a room and have an awesome conversation with each other. And that's what we're trying to create. And it's a strong network because you never know if the guests on here might start networking with each other because of what they offer. Like we have an awesome guy who does speed and agility stuff. Used to work with Joe. He's out in Chicago. We have, a physical therapist who has 30 years experience, an Olympic level rower who's got a great training concept that we brought on here. Who else did we bring on, Joe? We brought on.
We have Ben. Ben has worked at spear training out in Chicago as well. We've had a few doctors on, and 2 weeks we'll have Dr. Seward's on.
Yeah.
So who actually did my surgery.
Yeah. We brought on, what's his name from Kansas? Athletic performance.
Matt Mosman.
No, that was from Endurelite.
Sorry.
Yeah. So everybody's got a little bit of something that they can interact. And then what we would do is like, we go into our network and we say, hey, like we'll share this podcast and be like, we brought on Kate. Look at what she has to know, and then your information can help somebody else with something else and what they know, because we do have some other people who are working with pro athletes, and it might help them. It might network. You never know who knows who. So that's what's really cool about it, and we want to try to bring all this knowledge together so we can share it to the right people, and get it out there. So when you hear something stupid like squats are bad for your knees, now we have people being like, okay, dude, you're stuck 30 years ago. Grow up.
Listen to our podcast. You might learn something.
Yeah.
But we did say in the beginning that we will put, some of this stuff in the show notes. But Kate, where can they find you? Where can our large audience find you on social media?
Well, thank you all. www.instituteofathleticmovement.com is our website. Kate Decker _Institute Athletic is Instagram. We have another Instagram, which is Institute of Athletic Movement. We're on LinkedIn, and then we have a business Facebook page as well. So if they want to follow in any of those aspects, that would be awesome.
Cool. We'll put them links in there also.
I'm sorry?
We'll put those links at the end as well.
Thank you, Joan, and really appreciate not only having the opportunity to share, but to learn from you guys, and really appreciate your focus on helping so many people and educating and bringing all these individuals together from a networking standpoint. That's how we grow the change.
Yeah.
And make some positive improvements out there. It's awesome.
That might be a new little network tagline: growing the chain, Joe.
Growing the chain. Hey, listen, this came out of a curiosity that I had that was spawned off because of the conversations that Mike and I had during my physical therapy. And then he kept saying, you got to listen to this podcast. Hey, did you listen to this one? So I started listening to more so that we had more conversation. And, ironically, at the same time, I'm getting more knowledge and understanding. It's a simple way to get knowledge, and we're going to come up. We have a new thing coming. I want to put this at the end of the show. We have a new thing coming out. It's going to kind of spawn off of our podcast, our podcast. And it's going to feature Mike in a 15-minute segments. So we're gonna post more about that on our Instagram and stuff like that. So that's coming out. That should be out soon. Something a little bit smaller so that it's bite-sized information. I love these podcasts because we can go on for 2 hours. Sometimes people don't have that kind of time. They better for our show, but if they don't, we will be having these 15-minute segments with Mike and get some other questions answered. So if you are listening to this, start throwing in some questions that you might want to have Mike answer, because we're going to start firing away at him, have him answer some questions in a 15-minute segment. But
we'll also get like a little bit of a round table too, though. We're going to probably get some other people to come on and do like a quick thing. We get a couple different opinions from different people. So anyone who could join on that, we'll give them a heads up. hey, you want to hop on real quick for a round table? Because sometimes 15 minutes is easier for people to squeeze into their schedule than trying to do a full long one, you know? So
Bingo.
I think
Bingo.
that'd be helpful.
Hey, Mike, where can they find you?
So honey badger _ juicy at Instagram. That's where you get all the juiciest information, plus our new 15-minute of juice segment, the end. I'm on LinkedIn, and you can find me on Facebook. We're really active on IG and LinkedIn.
Awesome. You can find me on Instagram at coach_Haas. You can go to LinkedIn under Joe Haas, the Coach Haas Facebook page. I also have a YouTube page, Coach Haas. It's got over 200 something videos on there. This has been an amazing night. I can't thank the both of you enough. Have a great night, and we will talk soon.
Yeah, this was awesome.
Thank you both tremendously. Appreciate you.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Kate. See you, Mikey.
Thanks, guys.
All right, see ya. Take care.
Bye.